Hello and welcome to Sanford Uncut, a podcast for developers about building great products. Today, I'm excited to welcome Amjad Masad. Amjad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So please just go ahead and introduce yourself.
My name is Amjad. I am the co-founder and CEO of Replit. Replit is a collaborative and browser IDE. It's also a community of developers. It's also a platform where you can publish your software and collaborate with other people. And it's a great place to get introduced to programming. It's a great place to learn how to code and collaborate with other people. And before that, I worked at Facebook. I built developer tools at Facebook. I worked on Babel.js and worked on React Native and worked on the React Native packager, which became an open source project called Metro. I started that. And so at Facebook, I started a team called JavaScript Infrastructure Team. And we built a lot of the tools that people use today, Babel, Jest, a lot of the JavaScript tools. And before that, I was at Code Academy. And Code Academy, I did a similar thing to Replit. It was a lot more focused on guided education. But the idea is that you should be able to get a REPL in the browser and learn how to code. Just remove all the barriers to entry and let people experience the joy of programming as early as possible. And so I guess my life's sort of goal ended up being making accessible tools that are enjoyable for people to use. Even with my work at Facebook, I focused on really making software development fun, easy, accessible. I come from Jordan, and the vision I had back then is that the internet is this great equalizer. It's the place where, for the first time in the history of humanity, we have something that allows everyone anywhere, regardless of who you are, your socioeconomic status, your gender, your color, to be able to contribute to something larger than yourself and be able to reap the benefits of this new, digital economy. And so the vision I had is that for us to create a level playing field to allow everyone in the world to participate, the tools need to be easier and more accessible. So I kind of dedicated my career to building these tools.
Great and very inspiring. Yeah, I can relate to this. Many times whenever I kind of switch stacks and, try to get into something new, that barrier of entry of setting up things was actually pretty high. So, for instance, I started like in, early 90s with Visual Basic 4. And then later I wanted to get into Delphi, didn't, and then C++. And then, over the college and career, I mean, in hindsight, okay, it's simple, and you should solve it. You should get over it. But in reality, in those starting phases, that can really slow down you or discourage you from moving forward at all.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to require that type of investment. Let's say you're learning how to drive a car. We don't ask you to build the car or assemble it, right? But in programming, we do ask you to assemble the tools before you start. One of the critiques that Replit get is that, okay, we're doing magic, we're hiding complexity, we're discouraging our users from discovering things. But that's not true at all. What we see is that our users, maybe at the first steps, they kind of don't do that. But once they're proficient programming, they generally want to go understand how package managers work, how IDEs work, how interpreters work. They even write interpreters, they even write databases. And so it's not mutually exclusive to be able to understand, even back to the car analogy, like I'm really into cars. And, when I first started driving cars, I did not know anything about engines or anything like that. And then when I started like getting into cars and I started like tuning the car and buying parts and really figuring out how engines work and how gears work and all of that. And really, it's kind of about progression. It's about getting people in the door, seeing the value proposition, seeing the fun of it, and then you sort of reveal more of the complexity as they go on.
Yeah, and some people will decide to go super deep, but for some people that will not be of interest. They might be more interested in building something else, and that's fine.
That's true. I mean, it should be optional. Yeah.
We've just released the CI/CD for Monorepos ebook. It's for software engineers who are evaluating or want to optimize the monorepo way of software development. You'll learn how to build a monorepo-first CI/CD pipeline and have a functional microservice application built, tested, and deployed from a monorepo. Check it out on our website, semaphoreci.com/resources/monorepo-CICD.
I have a 6-year-old daughter, and this part about education and all that, what you were explaining reminded me of that, of how I introduce new people to things, and it has to be interesting, and on the surface, everything on the surface level is just fine. Let me decide where I'm going to dive super deep, and don't store me in the beginning with okay, you need electricity, let me tell you how electricity is made, and then next time I'm going to show you how you're going to program. Exactly. Yeah. Great. And you mentioned that you're also super interested about all the technology which is behind these networks of things and people. Can you talk more about on the technical side of Replit?
In terms of like my interest in networks and people, or like how the system works.
Well, I guess we can start with the system works.
Replit is at the intersection of everything I am interested in, and it's a fascinating set of problems. At the intersection of compilers and developer tools and systems programming and interface design and UI and people, networks, social networking. So everything I was interested in, sort of this became like a center of it all. And it's been super fun to work on all these ideas, and the breadth that we cover is absolutely fantastic. But that's kind of like what I was excited about from the start. I guess to talk about the technical stuff first, the one thing to start with is what happens when you go to Replit and you start a REPL. A REPL is what we call the environment. The name obviously comes from read eval print loop. It's a concept from the 50s that was started with Lisp. Lisp was the first dynamic programming language invented. And one of the really interesting things about it is that the code is data, and you can evaluate the code in the running program, right? So like eval in JavaScript or Ruby or something like that. And so that was the first instance of that. And, they had these primitives like reading something from the terminal, printing something out and evaluating it. And so you put them together, you have a one-liner that's really super powerful, which is read, eval, print loop. You read something to the terminal, you evaluate it, you print it, and you repeat. And you can bootstrap essentially an interactive programming environment using one line of code in Lisp, which is like just a fascinating concept in itself. I was really fascinated by it, and I was really interested in how we can apply that concept to daily programming. And I was really frustrated by how a lot of programming is about sitting down, thinking out a lot of ideas and plans for how to do something, designing an algorithm, and then going in and writing hundreds, maybe thousands of lines of code, and then running the program, and then figuring out that one of your assumptions is wrong. And then you have to repeat the entire process. And so interactive programming for me was about revealing the program as you go. It's almost like a conversation with the computer. And so that was kind of the idea I was starting with. And so with Replit was the idea is like, let's do it for all programming languages. And let's make that kind of the base of how you start coding. So when you start a REPL, what happens is we connect to a backend service. This backend service grabs a container, typically from a running container pool, because we want to keep them hot and ready. If it's a new project, it'll start a new sort of ButterFS file system for you. And we'll start storing that on GCS, which is S3 on GCP. And it will drop in a program that we call PID1. And so PID1 is, as it's called, it's the first process in the container. That process is responsible for communicating all the way from the container to the IDE, to the REPL. And it's responsible for all the operations that you might want to do as you're coding, right? So we use a protocol that's very similar in its nature to SSH, meaning there's a control channel where it allows you to open other channels. And so everything we do in the programming environment is based on a channel. So say you want to write a file, you open a file writer channel. And as you start coding, that's sending messages across. These messages are all, when we're dealing with text, we're typically dealing with operational transform messages. Operational transform is the kind of gold standard for collaborating on text. There are CRDTs, which I think are more popular now, but those are more generic, more complex, in some ways a lot more powerful as well. But OT is kind of simple for textual based collaboration. And so you open that channel. Those channels also have a built-in mechanism for collaboration because Replit is a collaborative editor at heart. And so you can broadcast these messages to other people on the system. They all connect to the same container. And then, the container starts, PID 1 starts, and you open a file, we open a channel, you start coding. Other people might see it if they're on the same session. And then we built a lot of layers on top of different languages to make them behave the same. So again, we wanted to create this like REPL experience, this interactive experience. So for example, we built this layer called prybar. So prybar makes a lot of kind of dynamic language top levels, the interactive REPL feel the same. So prybar, has support for Node, Ruby, Python, Lua, a lot of interactive languages. So that gets started on the console side as well. And as you're coding, you can run the code, you can see the code live, and then you can interact with the code via the REPL. And then again, on the abstractions, we try to abstract a lot of the layers that make up any kind of tooling you'd want in the workspace. So, for example, package management, we built this thing called Universal Package Manager. And this is a front end for all the different package managers in different languages. Again, a lot of what we do at Replit is taking best practices from the different languages and creating layers to make them behave kind of the same or in a predictable way, right? So whether you're in Python, Ruby, Node, Go, Rust, whatever, when you want to install a package, it all follows the same thing. And UPM has really interesting things like it will detect that you required a package and it will install it for you, for example, which makes it really fun for beginners. They don't have to deal with package managers. So the entire kind of user journey begins with this getting that container and then having all these tools ready for them and having a really simple interface that they can get started with. But it's also powerful and it's also progressively revealing its complexity if you need it. For example, when you're coding and you open a server port, right? You start an HTTP server on whatever port. We figure that out in the container. And then I think we used to use the Linux audit log, but I think we moved to something else that I'm kind of blanking on. I think we trap the syscall somehow and figure out that you're trying to do a server. And then we open a web view for you. And then the container gets started proxying requests to the container. So now we're building a web app. Not only you're building a web app, but also this web app is hosted for you. And so we take this approach to every other thing that you might want to do, whether it's graphics programming or other things like that. And so that's sort of like the core piece of it. In terms of the container management, a lot of people ask us, like, do you use like Kubernetes or something like that? And actually, when we started building this, Kubernetes was not the phenomenon that it is right now. And actually, I don't think it's very good for our use case. One, because of performance, and one is because we need to be starting and taking down all these containers all the time. So we built our own container manager that functions kind of like a distributed system. Like when you want to grab a container, you could get a container at a cluster that's geolocated closely to you. When you invite someone to collaborate with you, they go to the cluster closest to them, the data center closest to them, and then there's peering inside the system that allows them to kind of work with you. And so that aspect of it becomes really interesting, and how we bring things up and bring them down, how we do locks. so that you don't have two containers running at any time, which we had a big problem at some point, so distributed locking. And then how we manage costs, because we want to provide a free service, but we're providing free computers on the internet. So you're probably dealing with that at Singapore. There's a lot of like crypto mining. There's a lot of issues like that. So security is a very deep topic for us, but we've done well on it. That's another interest of mine starting out, as kind of, fighting fraud and things like that. So that's kind of the snapshot of the system.
We've just released the CI/CD for Monorepos ebook. It's for software engineers who are evaluating or want to optimize the monorepo way of software development. You'll learn how to build a monorepo-first CI/CD pipeline and have a functional microservice application built, tested, and deployed from a monorepo. Check it out on our website, semaphoreCI.com/resources/monorepo-CICD.
As you were talking about this, I was trying to imagine a journey of a user, starting out, maybe learning things and then, sticking with Replit and progressing, through their maybe just education, as a student or a young professional and so on.
I can tell you, I can paint a picture if you'd like.
Yeah, that would be great. Yeah.
One of my favorite users started when they were 9 years old on the platform when we started the company, so around 2016. And now they are like 14, 15, and they're still coding on Replit. And you can go to their profile and you can see their first line of code being hello world. And then you can see the latest application being a Django application. And, this is the first platform, I think, in the history of programming that shows you the progression of someone from their first line of code to their first application to potentially their first business. And what's interesting about it is that the platform is growing with the user, right? When they came, probably in 2016, Replit was a single file and a console. It was like purely a REPL. In 2017, I think we added multiple files. In 2018, we added the packager. In 2019, we added like web hosting. And before that, maybe we added multiplayer. So year over year, the platform is getting more exciting, more interesting for them to explore and to hack. And also, there are more people that they could learn with, that they could interact with, and they form friendships. And I think one of the things that I did not anticipate is Replit being a place to form deep, meaningful connections with people. And we see folks, especially on the younger side, saying like, this is my community. This is my friendships. This is what I do. And so that's been very satisfying.
I could imagine, somewhere in elementary school or, high school. So I'm the only one in my class interested in programming. Where do I find another programmer, of my age?
Exactly. Yeah, it's still the problem. Yeah.
Yeah. Great. I mean, from the side of like starting with technology, it's super interesting what you said. I don't know if I would really enjoy seeing it, but I would maybe want to see what my progression was and what was those lines over, like almost 2 decades that I wrote. But in terms of technology changes and switches and, going in loops, did you guys maybe did some analysis, observed something interesting that first language is JavaScript and they end up in making games in C++ or otherwise?
Yeah, no, we should. We haven't done that. And we haven't really invested too much in data analysis or like, just giving people insights on their own behavior and their own profiles. But we have all that data. And I think we should be able to do it. But, just like anecdotally, I see a lot of that zigzagging happening. I mean, you look at the industry in general and you see that zigzagging happening. Like when I started professionally coding, everyone was interested in like doing typed languages, and compiled languages were kind of table stakes. Like this is what you had to learn. This is what you had to do. You had to write safe programs. And then there was this rebellion led by PHP and then later on Python and Ruby and then JavaScript, where like no, dynamic everything, developer productivity is more important than bugs. And then now it's not exactly a zigzag, but it is a synthesis of these two ideas where now we have things like optional typing, like TypeScript, Dart, Flow, Python has one, Stripe did one for Ruby. We're like, oh, actually, like dynamic programs are actually very, very useful early on as a startup or writing a project. But once you hit scale, it starts really holding you back. And so now, like, typed languages are all the rage again. And so you see that in the larger ecosystem, and you definitely see a microcosm of it at Replit, where what people are interested in kind of changes all the time. And maybe we can get to it as you please, but this is why we're investing in Nix. So Nix is a purely functional package manager, and it's solving this problem where creating an operating system instance is this very sort of tricky, unsecure, sort of rolling the dice type thing, And their idea is that, no, actually, when you're creating your computer, essentially, yeah, everything should be reproducible. And reproducibility is great. It's also everything should be pure. So you know exactly what happened, right? So that you don't get man in the middle or you don't get a random package, as we've seen with, some of the stuff that happened in NPM around packages getting taken over by malicious actors. And so Nix kind of solved this problem. And when we looked at Nix, what we really saw was a solution to one of our deepest pains. One of our pains, and by the way, this is a pain for all PaaS like platforms, which is you want to create this runtime for your users that has all the tools that they might need, right? So the way Heroku works around that is that, well, we're going to create these stacks, like, they call them these interesting names, Sidar or whatever. They make you upgrade every once in a while. I need Node 16, Python 3.6, whatever. They can't really give you that. They have these kind of runtimes that you have to upgrade to in lockstep, and they make the decision of what versions of things. You can't do things a la carte, you know? And we went down that path. And so we built this thing called Polyglot. It's a play on polyglot. And we were like, all right, we're going to install everything under the sun that you might need, right? And turns out it's a really bad idea because, one, it's like impossible to upgrade. When you want to upgrade in package, there's like 60-70% likelihood that you're going to break something else. And it's not reproducible. If you break something, it's really hard to roll back. And that's obviously something that Nix could solve. So also the images that we were deploying were, 10 gigabyte images because it had all these random tools, right? So we're like, what we really want, we want a description of the set of tools that you want, and we want the output to be reproducible, cacheable, something you can really trust over time. So now when we want to support a language, we simply write the Nix expression. I want Node 16 with Git, with all these other tools. And it generates this image that's cacheable for us. We actually cache all the Nix packages. We have the shared drive that we mount on every container. And then when the next expression runs, we cache that as well. So we're creating these templates now that allow us to support all these variations of runtimes. So it's the first kind of PaaS-like platform to give you complete control over your runtime, but also is instant. Like, you don't have to go prepare a VM image and, snapshot that. No, you instantly can create these things. I'll give you an example of how this really benefited us. Right now, Web3 is a trend that's really big, right? So, developing smart contracts on Ethereum. And some people at the company are really passionate about Ethereum Solidity and things like that. And there's a lot of demand. We want to be able to support that. And we were able to get something working in 10 minutes because we were like describing the package was already cached. We're describing that, and it generated a Solidity environment in 10 minutes. It took us a little bit longer to add like syntax highlighting to make the developer experience really, really cool. But in a matter of 2, 3 weeks, we were able to release this new product essentially to the market, and the reception was absolutely crazy. It's like our tweets got something like 3,000 likes. It was featured on every newsletter for crypto, and it's been used thousands of times. It's getting us a lot of new users that we wouldn't have had exposure to. One, like, we believe that Nix is the future. Like, it's really obvious to us. We're kind of surprised that it hasn't really taken off in a major way just yet. We're investing in it. We donated $25,000 to the foundation. We try to help in any way we can, help promote it and write about it. But it's also just like made our system a lot more hackable. If you don't like something, you can change it. You can totally own your environment.
I can say that at this point in time, we are kind of opposition. I mean, just because, I would say that our current experience with Nix is that, people are bothering us,
Like for support?
Yeah. What more can we do, to support them better? And in just maybe last couple of weeks or a bit more, had some conversations around that with customers, and they're like super happy and super enthusiastic, and we are like early adopters, and we think it's amazing and great. And we didn't have a chance to dive deeper into that. But a lot of what you are describing is also a pain point for our customers, and then for us to support them, because those applications are composed out of many different versions of languages, databases, some other dependencies that they want to have, and they want to cache them. They want them fast, but it's not like that we can have hundreds of instances waiting just for them with their particular set of dependencies.
Yeah, my prediction is a year or two from now, you're going to arrive at the same technical solution that we have, to have like a large hard drive with caching all the Nix packages, and a lot of your customers is going to be using Nix. That would be my prediction. But who knows? I think it's just a matter of time when the world really wakes up to it. And I think a lot of misconceptions about, Docker is reproducible and cacheable, but it's really not the same thing.
Yeah, it's not. In our industry, there was a period of time that some of our competitors ditched VMs like completely. Everything has to be a Docker image. You cannot do anything outside of Docker image and all that. And a lot of people just want to get that instance that has that Ruby 2.6 point what, and that Postgres 11, and they want those two things, and they don't want to bother with, packaging, maintaining their images and upgrading them and all that. A lot of that in our industry ends up being, such a huge hype, as Docker is great. It's great for many use cases, but it's not that every single person wants to use that all the time, and
it's not a silver bullet, and it's also like not improving this at the rate that it used to be improving at. And I think because the company is struggling and things like that, there are alternatives now. I think there's something called Pod and things like that. So there's still some innovation there.
Yeah, but I also have a feeling that it hit a certain level, and I don't see what would be that would involve someone investing so much more into that to improve it to a significant new level at this point in time. Okay, great. I mean, this was like a fantastic journey. Is there something that you're particularly looking forward when it comes to Replit?
A lot of the things that I described are still in active development. And I think once we really nail down the Nix experience, the way I like to describe Replit is that it's going to be a bootstrapped environment. We're going to build the environment in itself. Bootstrapping goes all the way back to Douglas Engelbart, known for the mother of all demos. Bootstrapping right now is really known about compilers, right? You write the compiler, the language start working, rewrite the compiler in the same language, and then you throw away the old compiler, and now you have a bootstrapped compiler, which is a fascinating idea. That it just works, it's just an insane idea, right? Bootstrapping, actually, in the original sense of the term, is used a lot more broadly. The interesting thing about Replit right now as a bootstrapped environment is that we're going to be able to build Replit and Replit, and we're going to be able to use it internally to build Replit and Replit. And so it's kind of a bunch of recursive cycles, and the product is improving at a pace that wasn't improving at before. I think we're going to really accelerate development. We're going to make it a lot more powerful. If you tried Replit before, it didn't work for a use case, I would really try it now again or try it in a few months because the rate of improvement is going to be astronomical.
Great. We're excited to hear that. Amjad, thank you so much for joining us. Good luck with Replit, and let's talk again at some point.
My pleasure, and thank you for Semaphore. We're very, very happy customers.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.